Reddit, what's your frick HOAs story? California was undergoing water restrictions, some of which included not being able to water your lawn. That's fine with my mom, so we stopped watering our lawn. HOA however sends $500 fine every day when our lawn started to yellow. We go to court, and the court sides with us, basically saying that we can be fined for complying with state law about mandatory water use restrictions. Our nosy neighbor who did not like that ending, not one bit, so she files a barrage of noise complaints. Cops even stake out the neighborhood for a night to see if they were real. She makes another noise complaint. Cops on duty realize that the lady is making bullcrap complaints. She is given a talking to and told that if she files another false complaint she will be charged with wasting police resources and filing false complaints. HOAs give people power trips. HOA president, HOA treasurer, frick off, mind your own business. Should be a rotating presidency, otherwise you just get people who want to micromanage other people's lives over what shade of green is acceptable for your grass to be. We sold our HOA house in Cali just when this was starting. My neighbors continued watering their lawns. Apparently they had no interest in their fellow Californians having drinking water. I built my house 3 years ago, and obviously used whatever builders the developer sent there. I didn't really have a choice. They painted my mailbox post some shade of green. Last year I got a notice saying my shade of green was wrong and to fix it by going to Home Depot and asking for the color green specifically for my neighborhood. I responded that I checked the bless covenants and the mailbox color section did not clearly state the necessary color or color values, and its language was ambiguous and open to interpretation by any reasonable person. I also pointed out there were at least a dozen other mailboxes that did not meet these same vague guidelines, and there were multiple other things that needed attention that were far more detrimental to the neighborhood aesthetic than my mailbox post. Shade of green. I never heard anything back about it. Yes, I could have easily painted the mailbox post, but that wasn't the point. This was a petty thing, for some reason. And this is by no means an expensive neighborhood. Why would anyone want to live in a neighborhood with all the mailboxes painted the same color? Think I've told this one before, but it's just too good. One year HOA decided to force everyone to put these huge candy canes made of PVC pipe in their yards lining the street for Christmas. Some of the Jewish neighbors weren't cool with that and complained. How did the HOA respond? Replacing their red candy canes with blue ones. My favorite HOA stories involve Jewish neighbors and Christmas. Apparently, metal trash cans are against the rules. Got sent a fine for not using a plastic one. Guy who ran the HOA had a metal trash can. Took it up with him, and eventually find out he had been paying all his fines direct to the HOA president, which was himself. Took it up with him, and eventually find out he had been paying all his fines direct to the HOA president, which was himself. I'm not an expert on the matter, but that sounds a lot like fraud. Not mine personally, never lived in a HOA, but they built a HOA development when I was a teenager a few miles closer to town from where we lived. There was a house off the main road, right near their entrance that was pretty run down, but it there years before the development and hence wasn't part of the land they bought. They told the owner to fix it up and he rightfully told them to frick off. They asked him again and offered to pay part of it. Again, he told them to frick off. Finally, they offered to pay to fix up all of it. He agreed. This whole thing went on for over a year and there were people bitching in town that he was somehow the butthole when he living there before they did anything with the land. To the rest of us, he was a bit of a legend. The real life Mr. Fredrickson from Up. God bless people like this. Stand your ground and do as you always do. That is, unless your trash heaps overfloweth onto thy neighbor. You can only have terracotta pots for plants, like WTF who care? Who decided that terracotta is the best looking thing for potted plants and must always be used? Also, if you live anywhere that freezes, you have to replace them every few years because they crack, and they are heavy as frick empty, and they get too hot for some plants to handle. No thanks. So the HOA in my parents' neighborhood sent my mother a letter to take down her 2 pink plastic flamingos because they clashed with the architectural aesthetic of the neighborhood. Upper middle class sort of place. My mother formally complied, but made game flouting the rules after that. There were no restrictions in the bylaws against any sort of temporary seasonal decorations. So the flamingos come out for every holiday imaginable, redressed for the season. Flamingo witches and mummies for Halloween. Pullings and sleigh for Christmas. Football players for the all-important Clemson-Carolina rivalry game. It has gotten to the point where her flamingo dioramas a neighborhood institution with people looking forward them. On a related note, costumes meant for small dogs fit plastic pink flamingos pretty well. Your mother is awesome. Getting told I couldn't park my truck in my driveway. Apparently driving a restored classic truck is against some people's made up rules. You can suck a bag of dongs was the response. All of a sudden it's not in my driveway, it's in my yard. A giant concrete driveway isn't my yard, suckers. Well, it's just parked there and never gets driven. I drive it every day. They tried a few more things, always BS, and got told off. Didn't bother us anymore. Funny part is none of them followed their own rules and hadn't in a decade. The HOA crap was nullified by their blatant disregard for the rules long ago. Funny part is even though we lived in the woods, most everyone's house yard was kept in good shape, but the HOA folks. My sister-in-law bought a house in a brand new development. The land was an old farm. The farmer still lived in his old farmhouse on the edge of the development, so he decided to reside his house. The HOA found out and he sent him their swatches of approved colors. He was like, I don't give no shoots. I ain't part of no development. So he went to a couple of home improvement stores and got all their leftovers. I figure this is what he did because that house was a crazy patchwork pastiche of every god-awful color known to man. What a glorious, beautiful eyesore. God bless the USA and freedom. Houses in the States and I am not American. I think this story wins the thread. The only better thing he could have done would be to paint a giant middle finger on it. Our neighborhood is on a hill and has a pretty long driveway. They added a speed bump at the top of the driveway, right before the first house. It's the worst placed speed bump in existence. The head of our HOA says it isn't bad if you go 5 miles per hour, but you could go 2 miles per hour and it'll still mess with your suspension. There's already major scratches on the bump from all the hits from the undercarriage of cars, and it's barely been there a month. Everyone just goes around it, so frick that guy for being a piece of crap and not fixing the bump. I used to have an estate liquidation business and many HOAs wouldn't allow estate sales in their gated communities or would require an appointment for every buyer. So if it was a no estate sales allowed community, we would throw a party and tell all of our customers to tell the guard they were there for the party, and we provided email invitations. If it was allowed by appointment only, I would put a staff member at the gate and they would record the customers' names as they pulled up. They never said how many people or apps we were limited to. I worked hard for my clients and I'd be damned if they were going to prevent these homeowners that typically lived in these communities for 20+ years and paid their dues to not be able to sell their crap in order to sustain a decent quality of life. Ours is generally reasonable, actually, but there's a parking issue. Mill lives with us and has a car. Wife and I each have a car too. Due to everyone having to go places at different times, we could park 2 cars in the driveway, 1 car along the street opposite the house. And then they said, no cars parked on the street, but you can park it on the driveway sideways, blocking both cars. Okay, fine. So we did, but it meant constant car juggling. Then they said the 3rd car was not allowed at all, except in a garage. So we had to clear out a garage and put 1 car in there and continue the irritating car juggling. Made worse because our automatic garage door broke and we don't have the money to fix it. Anyway, the mill is too disabled to drive now, so the car juggling is over. Be thankful. There are some HOAs that will not allow certain pickups no matter their condition park where they can be seen. I actually became a board member in my HOA, learned the rules and got away with a whole lot of crap. If you really hate your HOA, get involved with it. Volunteer. People who are involved get cut all kinds of slack. That's why my dad was president for many years. He hated every aspect of it, but he did it because he didn't want someone with no life going around measuring his grass. Everyone loved him as the president. Worked for a law firm that did debt collection on behalf of HOAs as an attorney. I lasted less than a month before I quit that soul-sucking job. Frick HOAs. Ours has something like 80% of dues going to legal fees. I wonder whose brother has that gig. Our HOA is a little disassembled due to the neighborhood still being mostly in development. The people running the HOA are mainly a bunch of self-important pricks with too much time on their hands. My least favorite of the bunch are the couple put in charge of pool duties. It started when a group of teenagers, presumably from the neighborhood across the road, left pizza boxes over by the pool. Despite people having actually seen these teenagers in the pool the evening before, the pool couple decided that it was the work of a group of middle school boys, specifically my brother and his friends. Fast forward a month or so later, this is heard from my brother's friend's sister. When that water bottle flip fad was starting to hit the school, my brother and his friends were testing how high they could toss the bottle. When it landed on the roof, his friend's house is very close by, so they gathered a ladder and went to remove the bottle from the roof, and were in the act of retrieving said bottle when a man in a grey van swerved around the corner. The driver, the president of the pool committee, which, mind you, consists of him and his wife, cursed at the boys, screamed, threatened to call the cops, and took videos of them. At this point, the friend's sister called my parents about it, as she was somewhat frightened. One call to the police later, and the president of the pool committee was made to delete the videos, and given a warning. Later, he and his wife tried to ban people from throwing doggy bags in the trash cans next to the pool, which are the only trash cans available for one to toss said doggy bags outside of one's own trash can, and on the main stretch of road. They didn't like how it smelled after a month of stewing in the sun, but if they emptied the cans every week like they're supposed to, that problem wouldn't exist. I choose to pretend that that rule doesn't exist. Lovely family, that president of the pool committees. Every now and then I see one of his sons playing in the yard while I walk my dog. They're very loud, and have yelled at a girl for wanting to play with them because girls can't use Nerf guns, yelled at a different girl to go back to the kitchen, and that they're gonna shoot all them engines. It's like I've stepped back into the 50s, and that image isn't helped by their little white picket fence. They sent us a notice to clean our driveway or they'll send us a fine. Literally all we had were fallen flowers from the trees above our driveway. I didn't know fricking nature was considered messy. I felt ridiculous having to broom dirt and flowers outside. Be a nuisance. Get a loud butt leaf blower and fire it up for every little leaf and flower as often as possible. Not quite an HOA, but very similar. My subdivision came with a deed of covenant regulating the style of house you could build, and an architectural review board to enforce it. Sent my plans to the ARB. They got rejected. The reasons they gave were all bulls. For example, the proposed color of brick is out of keeping with the rural character of the western portion of the county. The chairman of the ARB was our prospective neighbor. Before the meeting, I spent a day driving around in about a 5-mile radius taking pictures of houses with similar colored brick to the color I wanted to use. I also looked through the deed of covenant looking for other stipulations, and took pictures of the other ARB members' houses, then reviewed them for violations. I took my architect along to the meeting. She helped me demolish, some of the more technical objections. Then it was my turn. I went through the deed of covenant. I took a drive around the neighborhood. Can you verify that these are all local homes, and describe the brick color? Lays down a dozen or more photos. All. Yeah, well, but, okay. It says here no log cabins. Randy, this is your house, right? I slapped down photo of his log cabin. Randy, yeah, but that's not a log cabin. It's a log home. And how did you get that picture of my house? I took it from public property. Architect, goes into 2 minutes diatribe on log cabin versus log home. Barry, the ARB says no visible TV antennas. This is a picture of your roof. What's that? Barry, well, it's a TV antenna, but the FCC says I have a right to put a TV antenna up. Sure, but it's in violation of the deed of covenant, isn't it? I mean, you can't just pick and choose the rules you want to keep, and the rules you want to violate. Barry, okay. And here, doesn't the deed of covenant say you can't put up decorative street lamps? What's that in the middle of the circle in your drive? Barry, hangs head, my wife bought that. Gentlemen, are we done here? I had the architect make a few minor changes to the plans. There were some details I had already decided I wanted deleted anyway that the ARB objected to, resubmitted them, and bingo, approved. Huge red flags. All pure insanity. Good luck in the future. Story from my grandpa. He received a letter from his HOA saying that his shed did not match the color of his house and that he needed to paint it. My grandpa's shed is behind his house in the backyard, impossible to see from the street. He called up the HOA and completely went off on them. I believe he told them he didn't even have a shed. Turns out they had the wrong address. His next door neighbor had a shed on the side of his house that didn't match. My grandpa went off on them even more and they ended up just hanging up on him. My HOA fee for my condo costs $300 more, and as far as I can tell, they do nothing. No landscaping, no property improvements, no trash, nothing. They can only account for 1/3 of their revenue, the rest going into a fund. But for some reason, I would bet my life's savings if there were a problem with the roof or something, we'd be hit with a hefty assessment. No one that lives here is on the board. It's a management company, so we're basically paying rent on a property we pay a full mortgage on. They refuse to update the common area carpets, even though the carpet is 25+ years old and moldy. Wouldn't have bought if I knew. 2 unbelievably stupid instances stand out. 1. After stating that the neighborhood was pet friendly, we got a talking to from someone saying how we shouldn't have our dog outside on the lawn because it will ruin the grass. 2. They told us our Christmas lights were distracting. On Christmas, we had one set on the porch, everyone else's were on the roof, fence, etc. Personally, I think that the HOA had a vendetta against us. I inherited a house that predates the local HOA. 1920s for the house and 1950s the HOA formed. Our deed explicitly states that we have an easement to a dock space and beach access. Every year since they formed, they left my parent alone since they were not part of the HOA. Well, back in the 70s when my parents inherited the house, they bought a boat. When they went to exercise the easement, they were told that they had to wait for an opening. A reasonable request. So they waited a few years and finally got a slip. After a few years, the HOA came looking for dues, rekeyed the gate, attempted to have their boat towed out, and sent letters of dues owed. After spending months in legal battles, they and the HOA came to a handshake agreement that we will pay the dock fees and nothing else. Another reasonable request. Well, come to me inheriting the house. They are now saying that I owe dues dating back to the original lawsuit. New management doesn't know of the handshake agreement. I showed them the deed and percentage dues paid for dock upkeep. Contacted past HOA board members that confirmed the agreement, but they want the rest. If this goes back to court, I will try to keep the original agreement my parents have since I am paying for dock upkeep. But if they want all the back dues, I will exercise my easement and build my own dock with blackjack and H. Maybe not the blackjack and H, but I will build my own. Actually, forget the moon lander. I had a satellite dish installed in the front of my house due to trees in the back that blocked the signal. A few years later, I get a violation for not having approval for said dish. I informed the HOA manager that the FCC restricts the HOA from not allowing me to place the dish in a spot where it can get a signal, and I have no problem filing a complaint if needed. The HOA then agrees to drop the fines if I have DirecTV come out and fill out a statement that the only spot for my dish is in the front of the house. What a waste of my time and the satellite installer's time. That's when you file the complaint and send them a screenshot of it. I gave you a chance. Enjoy your fines. I compete in a barbecue contest for charity every summer. While considering my competition, I knew I needed a team name that really struck fear into the hearts of 35-55-year-old married men. We are the Homeowners Association. I have lived in a HOA for 3/4 of my life. First one is when I was about 13. The neighborhood made it mandatory all children wear a helmet for any moving plaything. Bikes, skateboards, scooters, etc. Well, we were sent multiple warnings because I would walk from the entrance from my neighborhood to my house cause the roads were crap and a pain to ride my skateboard on. And I knew to strap that crap between my back and backpack to avoid being talked to by HOA members. second time was when I was 20. I had to give my mom rides to and from work for about a month. There was this house with shit kids running into the street not looking, throwing bottles at cars, leaving crap in the middle of the road. Well, we got a fine for speeding and endangering children from the HOA, which my mom thought was interesting being she was the president of the HOA at the time, trying to control the kind of crap the kids were doing. Turns out lady was in the HOA board and forged some crap and was trying to take over as president, blah blah blah. My mom started recording our trips home and sent a real fine to the house and had child protection services brought to their house. My mom is an ice cold bee when you cross her. House got foreclosed by the bank anyways, and my mom stepped down 3 weeks after the incident, cause in her words, these uneducated bimbos aren't going to give me crow's feet. Freaking bottle kids. I lived in one that had to approve of any changes that were being made to the outside of the house front yard. I requested some assistance with choosing a new color of paint for my front door. They never wrote me back. I ended up moving a year later and painted the door white. I had been light grey before. They had a ton of rules that they wanted us to abide by. Only certain flowers could be planted, etc. No more HOA for me, thanks. And a vivid teal door on the next house I bought. I lived in a building that was a failed condo building, so it was maybe 25% owners, the rest renters. The HOA was incompetent. The following events happened. One of the owners decided he could leave his gross dirty, used mattress in my parking space. I tossed it outside where it swelled up. To thank me, he annexed the wash your car space and stored his gross mattresses there. The building owner decided who could show people's apartments whenever he wanted to prospective buyers. If they didn't give me adequate notice, well, no showing for you. The owner never got unique locks for each unit, so my key could open any non-owner key. The corrupt super knew when people were coming and going, and let his friends stay in people's apartments. They cut power to the entire building. After someone threatened the power guy, we got it restored to our individual units. The hallways were dark and the elevator no longer worked, which was great for the disabled people who lived in our building. The owner was taking the rent money assessments and keeping it. We owed the power company $60,000. So thank a good HOA, not an incompetent one. After these revelations I said frick you. Bought a place and broke my lease 3 months early. That mattress was garbage the second it ended up in your parking space. While I was helping my buddy move stuff out of his house to a new house, my mom called me saying there was a family emergency with my father and I needed to come home right away. I tell my buddy that I need to go and drive home as fast as possible without getting pulled over. My neighborhood has a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. We live in a pretty diverse neighborhood, so quite a few people don't pay attention to it. Well, as I'm pulling 30 miles per hour going up my street, I spot one of the HOA enforcers standing on her lawn and sprint into the middle of the street at the last minute. I slam on the brake and she runs up to me screaming about how dangerous it is to drive that fast and how I need to slow down because there are children. Children are usually inside or monitored by parents when they're outside. And what I could have done? I simply gaped at her and said, normally, I'd expect a stupid child to run into the street without looking first. Guess I was right. My dad died laughing when we later received a letter from her explaining the situation in detail. But Dad. They charged me $15 for my own clubhouse card to use the pool, a sticker for your car to get through the community gate, and then you have to pay for another sticker to get inside your own neighborhood gate. It's like double gates. That's $40 right there, and that's only for one car. And you have to get separate money orders for each sticker. Frick, I hate HOA. I got sent a letter cause I had 11 plants flowers out front, not the required 12. One died and I didn't replace it. I ignored it though. Didn't get any more letters about that. With 12 you'd probably get a letter of the HOA's concern of you're only displaying the bare minimum 12 flare plants. I live in a crappy college town and during moving time my roommate and I out a couch we didn't want out on the curb. By the end of the day it was gone. 3 days later we get a letter in the mail with a full page picture of the couch out front saying how we need to move it immediately. What really pissed me off is that they came to our house and took a picture, then took the time to type a letter and mail it when all they had to do was come knock on our door and politely ask us to move it. They are preparing for future issue. They now have a record of the warning on paper. It means they are probably litigation heavy. So I used to live in this little group of townhomes. Behind the houses there was a gigantic lawn where all the kids used to play. Basically, an old guy and his wife started taking pictures and threatened to report it to the HOA unless we left. We ended up just staying there and the old guy got sick of it. Plus some kid's parent threatened to sue for taking pictures. They sent us a letter saying our grass was too high and our lawn was unkept, when clearly our tree was growing back and our grass was only a bit up to our ankles, all the while a few other yards had jungles. And we're talking grass up to your knee. As someone from Europe, of all the weird, messed up crap I hear about American culture, HOAs has definitely got to be in my top 5. They all sound like socially acceptable cults. Some close friends moved into a newly built neighborhood with HOA. The HOA decided to throw a neighborhood party but also told everyone coming that they'd have to pay an additional $20 a person and to bring a dish. So not only are they paying big HOA fees, but just to come to the party they have to pay more money and bring a dish. The funny thing about it is everyone in the neighborhood was communicating through email. Our guy friend emailed his wife that he'd rather punch his own dong than go to this party and have to pay more money to the HOA. Problem is he replied also the entire neighborhood got it. Apparently no one said anything and they moved shortly after. Haha. Bought our home in a HOA neighborhood but instructed my attorneys and real estate agents to conveniently ignore and forget to sign any HOA related documents. Moved in and promptly forgot to pay any dues. Eventually, they started sending threatening letters, which I completely ignored. One day some pinhead actually came by my place to ask why I wasn't more involved with the HOA and why I was so hard to reach. I responded that as far as I was concerned I was not a member of any such association. When he tried to contradict me, I invited him to prove it. It's been years. I never heard from them again. Frick HOAs. I live in a HOA neighborhood, although not in the US. Never really had any problem with them. All they really do is organize an annual community cleaning thing to keep the area looking tidy, and letting people know they can't change the base color of the house, dark red, and set up the mowing schedule for the shared green spaces. Oh, and we pay them a pittance for the shared outdoor lighting in the garages. That's what a HOA should be like. Sadly, more often than not you get the horror stories. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.